morning. Thanks for joining. Today we are up to chapter 30. Very, very powerful chapter. And depending on the timing, we may cover 31 as well. Quick recap. Let's bring everybody into the loop, see where we're up to. So since chapter 26, we've been discussing the significance and the importance of always being positive, joyful, optimistic. Because if a person is down, if they're sad, if they're despondent, you can't succeed. It's impossible to win, to be successful in anything. Doesn't matter what it is, certainly not in the ability to spiritually be strong and nourished, well-guided, to be able to make sure that your godly soul has all the strength that it needs to be able to overcome the challenges, the daily challenges and struggles that the animal soul presents for the aspiring Benoni, the one that wants to live a balanced in-betweener life where thought, speech, and action is in perfection. It's not easy. And to be sad and depressed and down is an absolute guarantee for failure. It's impossible to win. So we were talking about the importance of always being positive, optimistic, but easier said than done. What if something's not going right? What if there are problems? So we talked about it. We addressed it from many different angles, from physical, material problems. A person doesn't have money they need, their health isn't challenged, or whatever it may be. We talked about spiritual issues. What if I feel that I'm not living my life the way I should? I feel guilty of sins that I have committed. I know some deep, dark things about myself that I'm ashamed about, and so on and so forth. So we talked about each of these ideas. Then, last week, we went into another angle. And the angle was that sometimes, even after all the discussion and all the exercises that we discussed, really from the beginning of Tanya, from chapter 1 through now, they don't seem to be making leadway. No matter what happens, no matter what I do, and I tried every single one of these steps, I cannot get myself to become actually really, truly inspired. I still don't really care about godliness, about a mitzvah, about spirituality. I'll do it because I know it's right, I'm respectful, but to tell me that I feel it, I love it, I'm passionate about it, no, it just doesn't talk to me. So the Alter Rebbe says you may have a condition called Timtum Halev. You may have a clogged heart. You need to see a cardiologist, but in this case it's a spiritual cardiologist. You have a problem, your heart is clogged. That means that everything in the brain and the mind is set up properly for success, for it to work, but there's a blockage. So it's not penetrating the heart, and therefore you're not moved. What's the spiritual bypass surgery to be able to clear the clog and empty it and make sure the tubes are going to be clear and everything can flow properly? What's this procedure? So the procedure for that in the spiritual realm is an activity, an exercise that is otherwise considered dangerous, and it's considered something that one should really not engage in on normal circumstances, but in a situation like this, you have no choice. And sometimes, like if a person is ill, you have to take a drug. It's always better to live naturally and healthy, but sometimes you need a drug because your body is not balanced properly and you need to push it back into shape. So this is a spiritual drug. It could be dangerous, but if it's done with the right purpose and with the right measure, it can be very successful. And what is that drug? That drug is you got to shock the animal soul. You got to break, you got to crush its shell. Deflate its arrogant balloon. And what's the way to do that? Put it in its place. Tell the animal soul, I know who you are. I know what you're all about. Enough with this. Stop. We said the terms last week. The Alter Rebbe describes, you look at the animal soul and you tell him, Atara, Rasha, Mishukatz, Mentuav, you're bad, you're evil, you're disgusting, you're despicable, and so on and so forth. Call it names. Shout at it. Get angry in a positive, regulated way at the animal soul for what it's doing. Why? Because what the animal soul is essentially affecting on this person, not only is it creating all these challenges and obstacles for it to be able to succeed and do what it's supposed to, it's confusing the individual to the point that the person begins to identify by the animal soul and its narrative instead of identifying by the godly soul, which is really the true essence and core of every Jew. So rather than see myself as a Jew who loves God and wants to serve God and wants to do the mitzvot and study Torah, I see myself as just a mundane, materialistic human being that likes sushi and pizza, and I like to hang out with the guys, and just that's all I care about. I don't want anything else. But that's not true. That's not who I am. But the animal soul has confused me so much to the point that I start to identify with its narrative, and now I don't even know who I am anymore. So we got to tell the animal soul, enough of this. I know that's not who I am, and I'm going to break out of all this. But the problem is that because I start to identify with the animal soul, so although I'm talking to the animal soul, the way it's going to be expressed is that I'm telling that to myself. And normally, it's not a healthy idea for a person to speak negatively to themselves or to think negatively of themselves, to put oneself down. That's not a conventional model for success, to put yourself down. That's not the right way to do things. But that's what we're saying. It's a medicine. Sometimes you have no choice. Sometimes you've reached the point that if you don't put yourself in your own place, it's not going to work. Now the benefit here is that you're not really putting yourself down. You're putting your animal soul down. But right now you identify as the animal soul. So it looks like you're putting yourself down. But the purpose, the goal is to crack the shell of the animal soul and to allow for the truth of who you are, which is the godly soul, to begin to shine and to become more expressive and felt in your being. So that's the idea. So how do I go about doing that? So the Alter Rebbe advised, take a moment and reflect honestly and truthfully about who you are and what you do. And if you can't think of anything inappropriate that you're doing, think of things in the past. Think of dreams. So he goes as far. There are certainly things in your reality that aren't the way it should be. Call yourself out on it. Say, that's not okay. That I'm speaking like this to people, that I'm having such thoughts, that I'm doing things I shouldn't, or I'm avoiding things that I should. I got to be honest, and I got to put myself on the spot to say that's not okay. In other words, if I don't start to feel that there's a problem, I can never help myself. And the problem is that I don't realize that there is a problem. So one way to realize the problem is to say, there are things about my living, the way I live my life, that are just not the way it should be. Enough of this self-justification, of always trying to say what I do is okay because I have this excuse and that excuse. That's not okay. I got to call myself out and say, that is not acceptable. That's chapter 29. Now we're going another notch into this. And then chapter 31 is kind of going to close the loop and bring us back to where we were before. So chapter 30 says like following. It addresses a very fundamental issue that probably most people struggle with. And for many of us, we don't even notice it to be considered as a struggle. We just think it's a reality part of life. Except that that's the way it is. But it's not appropriate. And what is that? That is the phenomena that we tend to judge ourselves against other people. The way I'm going to determine whether I'm okay or not is by comparing myself to somebody else. And naturally, because I'm always trying to make myself look better, who are the type of people that I'm going to compare myself to always? Those who are worse than me, so then I can justify that I'm okay. You think I'm bad? Just look at that guy. You're calling me out? Hey, look what that person does. So, what am I doing? I find somebody else who's worse off than me, and then use that as a justification for the way I live my life. What's the stamp of approval for the choices I'm making because there's somebody else who's making worse choices? Or there's somebody else who's making my bad choice more often than I do. So one time I did it, but look, that guy does it every day. Okay? So here the Alter Rebbe really challenges the notion of this perspective, of this attitude, in a very direct and logically beautiful manner. He says the truth is that you could never judge yourself against anybody else. Because ultimately, what you're really doing when you are comparing yourself to somebody worse off and saying you're okay because so-and-so is worse, what you're ultimately doing is passing judgment on that person. You're deciding they're worse off, And as a result, you're justifying what I'm doing because I decided that what you're doing is much worse. Who gives me the right to pass judgment on you? To say that what you're doing is worse. I don't really know what's going on in your life. I don't know the challenges that you're going through. I don't know what difficult choices you may be up against. So let's take something very, very extreme. I see somebody is stealing. They're being dishonest with the money. It's horrible. And I will use that maybe as a justification to say that guy is an outright crook. I'm just small little white lies, little small scams here and there. Nothing too bad. I didn't totally wipe somebody off the books. Just a little bit here and there. I'm not 100% honest. Isn't this how we do business? Yeah, you get a little bit like this, a little bit like that, and then you finagle your way through. At the end, you make a couple of dollars. But what's the big deal? Look, everybody does it. And that guy, look what he does. He sells this thing marked up. He would never even tell you, and he does it all day. So I did a small thing. Now, the truth is that it may not be wrong what I am perceiving or what I'm noticing about that other person. But what's not right is how I'm judging that person. Why? Because I don't know the background, the circumstances of that individual. Now, that doesn't mean that it justifies, let's say, for example, somebody who is under severe pressure for whatever reason. Maybe they cannot support their family. They're about to be evicted from their home. And they're stressed to the moon. And they figure out a way to make a couple of dollars to be able to stay in the house another month. It's not the most honest manner to be able to achieve that, but they're doing that. Now, that doesn't justify a person can never steal no matter how much pressure they're under. Stealing is always wrong. But it's like the story that there was once a younger, maybe a teenager in town, a younger person who was caught stealing. He was going to shops, taking some food here, taking this there. And the people in town caught this person. They wanted to kick him out. They wanted to arrest him. They wanted to make the big deal. One older person comes and says, excuse me, wait a second, let me deal with this. This kid is an orphan. This kid doesn't have parents. He doesn't have anybody to provide for him. He's starving. Have you ever been an orphan? Have you ever been in a position that you literally didn't have what to eat? How can you judge this person? He took the kid by the hand, talked to him, tried to help him, encourage him. Now, it's not a means to justify, yes, God forbid, even an orphan who's starving still can steal. But if somebody like that steals, it's not the same like you in the comfort of your couch, scamming people here and there at your convenience because you want to make a couple extra bucks. They're both wrong. But guess what? You're wrong, even though it's smaller, is much more wrong than that guy's wrong. And the same thing in the positive. I say to myself, let's use an example of tzedakah, of charity. What's the big deal? I give a lot of charity. Somebody's going to say that I'm not helping enough, I'm not generous enough. I give a lot of charity. I gave $10,000 to charity. Look, that guy only gave $1,000. I'm okay. What are you coming to me? Now, it happens to be that guy that gave $1,000 to charity gave his last $1,000 that he had. This is all he had. He literally lives paycheck to paycheck, and he scraped whatever. He gave $1,000 to charity. You gave $10,000, but you happen to be sitting in a wealth of who knows what. And for you, the $10,000 is like a sneeze. You would blow that on one trip to the casino, and instead you gave it to charity. So you're justifying your greatness by comparing yourself to somebody else, but you never know what that person really is going through. So it could be you gave in volume, you may have given a larger sum to charity, but your sacrifice is nothing compared to that other person's sacrifice. So your 10,000 is not even worth a fraction of what that other person's 1,000 is. So how can you judge yourself against somebody else? You think you're okay because you didn't do more. You did less. But what do you mean? I gave volume, I gave more. Great. Your volume, you gave more, but the effort is nothing compared to the other person. And the same logic can be applied. A person who makes an effort to come attend a Torah class. A person who makes an effort to come and pray. What do you mean? Look, I prayed. That guy, he doesn't even show up twice a year. I came once a month, so what do you want from me? Well, for him, he doesn't know how to pray. He doesn't understand what's going on. And yet, he comes twice a year because he feels this is what he needs to do. And you know it's so comfortable for you, and you can't bother, but you can make it just fine. So your once a month is worth nothing compared to even that person's twice a year, whatever it may be. So the same concept applies in every situation. So ultimately, what we're saying here is that in case the exercise of chapter 29 for some reason didn't work for you because you're so perfect and you couldn't even find anything wrong about your lifestyle on your own, well, says the Alter Rebbe, let's take this another notch further. It could be that some of the reasons why you're not finding anything wrong with yourself is because you're justifying your choices compared to somebody else. Well, let's knock that out, because that's all a bunch of nonsense. Because that's based on a premise of judgment on the other person, and it's wrong to judge anybody, not just because it's wrong to judge, but because it's not true. Your judgment is inaccurate. You're not seeing the full picture, and you will never be able to see the full picture. We can never really truly know what's living in somebody else's heart. The Alter Rebbe actually gives an example of a person who perhaps is behaving in a moral standard that is somewhat inappropriate. Maybe the way they interact with other people, doing things that are not appropriate. And then this person says, look, so one time I did one thing, but look, this guy. He says, you're comparing yourself to that guy. The Alter Rebbe doesn't use these words, but it's pretty much what he's saying. That guy, his business is on the strip in Vegas. You work in a cubicle in some office building in Rockland. You can compare yourself to that guy. You know the challenges that person has to face just to show up to work every single day. What he has to be exposed, what he sees, and what he experiences day in, day out to be able to even manage his day-to-day work. You're sitting in a cubicle. You have no excuse to start wandering into these and inappropriateness. That's not your place. Now, again, that doesn't justify that person's action. But that person, his challenge is very great. So maybe that one time that he held himself back, that he restrained himself from doing something inappropriate or saying something inappropriate is more difficult than all of the efforts that you're ever going to make. So don't compare yourself to somebody else by passing judgment on them and then approving and justifying your mistakes or your shortcomings. So that's a very fundamental idea and important in order to be able to really get to the point, which the point we're trying to get to is the person coming to the realization that the way I'm living is just simply not okay. I need to make a big change. Another way to explain this, we all know that, God forbid, a person faces a serious crisis. It becomes a pivotal moment, like a moment of truth, that can redirect, it can shift the lifestyle of the person for the rest of their life. God forbid, a person faces a huge crisis, it could shatter their entire reality, and then things can become restructured completely different. What we're essentially saying here is, rather than wait, heaven forbid, for a severe crisis, make a crisis. Put yourself in crisis mode. How do you put yourself in a crisis mode? When you realize that your life is just not okay. I cannot continue living this way. And here we're talking about in a spiritual sense. I cannot continue living the way I am. Why? What's wrong? It's okay. I'm just a regular good guy. Look, like everybody else. That's the point. Chapter 30 is saying, don't say I'm like everybody else. Because you don't really know if you're like everybody else. Just because you're looking around and you're saying that on the external, it looks like I'm living like everybody else. I do what everybody else does. I do some of the good things. I do some of the bad things. Kind of a regular guy. But you don't really know because you may be working so much less in effort than all these other people that although they have only reached so far, but their effort is incredible, and you may never know that. This takes us back to something, a concept we talked earlier in chapter 15, where we talked about the value of the effort. That the effort is more meaningful than the results. The Torah gives more credibility to effort than to results. Doesn't mean that a person shouldn't try to achieve results, but the effort is the most valuable. And if a person achieved great results with minimal effort, they haven't even started yet serving God. Because the service of God at the end of the day is about how hard I work, about the effort. That's why it's called Avodat Hashem. Avodah is from the term to work hard. Hard work, hard labor. In Hebrew, that's the term that's used for labor in general. But the term in the Holy Tongue, in Lashon HaKodesh, Avodah, comes from the idea called ibud orot. Ibud orot means like a tanner. Somebody who's taking animal hide and turning it into leather. Anybody who's ever done any kind of tanning knows that the amount of physical effort and exertion that's involved in tanning is high. And that's why the term for service of God is termed as such, because it comes from that notion. Because the goal, the idea, the true concept of service of Hashem is a person working hard. So if you were lucky and you're born in circumstances that are favorable and makes it easier for you, doesn't mean you have a pass to be able to not work hard. It just means that the expectation of you is that much greater. And don't compare yourself to somebody else who isn't as fortunate as you in those circumstances and then say, I'm okay. There's a story, there was once a chassid who came to the son of the Alter Rebbe. The Alter Rebbe is the author of the Tanya. He had a son who later became the Rebbe himself. His name was Dovber. He was, at the time, he was a younger person. He wasn't yet the Rebbe. He was a young boy. And this chassid came to him and said, you think that your prayer is that significant? That your prayer is so great? Of course, you were born in a house, your father is the Rebbe. You've been sheltered and raised in an environment that all you know is godliness and spirituality. There's nothing, no temptations, no negative influences that ever creeped into anywhere near your vicinity. You are well versed in the teachings of Hasidus. You have been shown the beauty of prayer. Of course, you pray, but that's worth nothing. For me, my father doesn't even know how to read. I never received a Jewish education. I don't even know anything about Hasidus. But I tried hard and I taught myself how to read. And when I come to the prayer, I really work hard. He says, my prayer is a prayer. Your prayer is free. It's nothing. And when the boy heard this, he was so taken by those words that he broke down crying. And then the Alter Rebbe came to that person and he said to him, thank you, you made my child into a real chassid. He learned that you have to work hard. Just because you produce great results, that's not impressive. What's impressive is that you really worked hard. And then you produce some results, whatever those results may be. That's impressive. So if you couldn't yet bring yourself to the point of recognizing your failures and your shortcomings by simply reflecting on your own actions, then just compare, look at somebody else and say, oh, I think I'm okay because look at that person. No, that person is working, is struggling, is really working hard to reach the small accomplishment, the small achievement they reached. You have it easy. For you, it's given on a silver platter. Come on, produce real results. Now I'm motivated. Now I'm inspired to realize that this is no good. I need more. But that brings us to chapter 31. And this is very important to be able to come back around to that. The goal here, let's remember again, the goal here is not that I put myself down and then I say I'm good for nothing, I'm worthless, I don't work hard enough. That's not the goal. The goal is to be able to come back out of this exercise changed. Changed meaning that I realize that I need to better myself. I need to stop identifying as the animal soul and begin to identify myself with who I really am, which is the godly soul. That will cut through the clogness of my heart that wasn't allowing for all the ideas and all the concepts that we studied up until now to actually move me, to actually make a difference in me.
It's interesting because that's like the counterintuitive to the American culture and capitalism. It's all about the results. Work smarter, not harder. And then for spirituality, it really matters on the effort rather than the results. Mm-hmm. It's exactly the opposite.
Yeah, because it's about truth.
Okay, I have a question. Does Hashem look at Baal Shuva, like the people who grow up not religious and become religious, because it's like more of an effort? Like, are they viewed in a different sense than someone who grows up, in religious and remain religious?
So the Talmud says like the following: B'makom shebalei tshuva omdim, afilu tzadikim gmurim einam yecholim lamod bo. Which means the status to which a Baal Teshuvah stands, a perfect tzaddik can never reach. That's what it says in the Talmud.
Just the effort.
Yeah. This is the
more
transformation,
evidence
the balance. It's the challenge. And this takes us back to a concept we said before. The Beinoni is the real hero of the Tanya, not the Tzaddik. Because the Tzaddik is perfect, he's never challenged. It's beautiful. It is amazing. And we need Tzaddikim. Here and there, we got to have a few of those. Because they remind us of what we're supposed to be. But who's the hero? The hero is the Beinoni. What's the Beinoni? The Beinoni is a fellow who's got every possible struggle. It doesn't have it easy. It's not necessarily motivated, not especially interested, not super excited. But the Beinoni is the fellow that works with himself and really pushes himself day in, day out to be able to do the right thing. Is it as perfect as the tzaddik? Not at all. But it's far more valuable. And that's the idea. And that's what we're trying to get to. So chapter 31 is reminding us what's the goal. The goal is not, God forbid, to remain in this mindset of worthlessness. I'm nothing. I'm no good. God forbid. That's not the goal at all. And that's why we say this is dangerous. Normally, a person should never do this. This is not the right way to get to things. You should try to inspire yourself by thinking of the positive, your godly soul, and who you are, and your identity, and everything we studied in the previous chapters. But when it's not working and you're clogged, you have no choice. You gotta take the drug, you gotta shock the system. But do it carefully, and do it in a controlled environment. This is chapter 31. Sometimes you have to set a fire. You ever see they have what they called controlled burnings in the forest. Sometimes you gotta set a fire. Yeah? You have a controlled burning, exactly. You have to do it sometimes, but it has to be controlled. You can't just say set a fire, I'll come back in 3 days and check up on it. You gotta set the parameter, you gotta make sure you have the right layers of blockage to make sure the fire is not going to spread to where it's not supposed to go to, and then you can set the fire. Setting a fire in a forest is a very dangerous thing. Don't do that. But sometimes you have to do it, but you got to do it in a controlled environment. The same thing here. This is sometimes a necessary exercise, but it's got to be in a controlled environment. So chapter 31 gives us some tips how to be able to establish a controlled environment. One tip, he says, number one, remember the goal. The goal is to come out of this. Meaning, the goal is to come out of this super motivated, highly charged to change, to improve, to get better. So if your thinking is not leading you that way, then it's not controlled. You're not thinking the right way. So think of it in such a way. You have a business meeting. There's a problem in the business. It's not producing the numbers that it needs to. You finish the quarter and you're sitting with the whole team and you're looking over the reports and your numbers are not getting to where they're supposed to be. We have a problem. We got to figure something out. So one attitude is the person that sits there and says, forget about it. This is a bad product. Delete. Rip it up. We're closing shop. It's over. It's not worth it. That's an attitude. And sometimes in a business reality, sometimes that is the truth. And you have to be willing to accept that. But that's an easy escape. Then you have another person that sits there, ripping hair out of the head, thinking and saying, what can we do differently? We got to change course. Something we're doing isn't right, and that's why it's not working out. We got to restructure our strategy. We got to reshift the way we look at things. Maybe the marketing, maybe the business plan, maybe the goals, whatever it may be. Yes, it's a very candid recognition of reality. I'm not trying to sugarcoat, oh, it's okay, we reached the number even though this quarter was low, last quarter was high, so we're okay at the end of the year, it's all going to even out. No, I'm not trying to sugarcoat it. I'm not trying to deny or ignore the problem. But I'm looking at the problem with a very solution-oriented perspective. Say, there we have a problem. What can we do to fix it? What can we do to change it? And that has to be the attitude in this as well. I'm not just looking at myself to say I'm worthless, and that's the end of the statement. It has to be, I'm worthless in this way. How can I make myself be worthy? That's the goal. So my entire mindset in this exercise has to be very solution-oriented. And if it's solution-oriented, then you will be able to have results. Not only are you going to have results, the Alter Rebbe quotes a passage from Mishlei. Mishlei's Proverbs, King Solomon writes a passage there, a very beautiful idea. Bechol etzev yeh motar. From every sadness, there's going to be benefit. Normally, sadness is no good. Avoid sadness. But King Solomon says in Mishlei, from every sadness, there's benefit. Now, it doesn't always work out that way because oftentimes we're sad inappropriately. But if we had a controlled environment, sadness, then it will be beneficial. Not only is it going to be, what does it mean it's going to be beneficial? The result you're going to achieve because of that sadness is one you would never get to in a normal conventional course. In order to reach that breakthrough, you had to go through this narrowness, this pain, this awareness of the candid truth, the painful truth, and that is what gives you the breakthrough, the power to be able, it's like a shuttle, a space shuttle. How do you shoot it out in the air? You got to set a fire, you make an explosion, and that's going to propel it to go flying high. This sadness is the explosion, this crack of the shell of the animal soul. When done properly and with a controlled environment, with a solution-oriented mindset, is going to be the explosion that will propel your moving forward now, your success, to a level that you would never reach had you just gone through a normal conventional path. Yes?
Does the sadness follow the anger that we talked about last week? Where you, whatever it is, you get angry?
So the anger is like an expression of the sadness. In order to get angry, you have to first get sad. Meaning, the sadness is the awareness of the horrible reality. If you don't get sad, meaning if you don't become upset and sad by the fact that this is no good, you're never going to be able to get angry. You're never going to be able to say, I want to break this, I want to break out of this. You first have to be able to face the reality and say, this is no good. I cannot continue living like this. And then I can look at myself and say, so what? I'm going to say, I can't live like this. I just want to, that's it. I'm going to be depressed. Pull the blanket over my head. I'm not coming out of bed anymore. It's like being dead. Just dead breathing. This is no goal. All I'm going to do is watch movies and talk to friends and complain and bemoan my sad reality. That doesn't help. But if I say to myself, this is no good, I got to change. I got to do something. So the first thing is I look myself, which isn't really myself, but it's my perceived self right now, my animal soul, and say, you're good for nothing. Get out of the way. Ad matai tastira Torah himself. How much are you going to keep concealing over the light of God that's within me? Get out of the way. Give me an opportunity to be able to feel, to experience the light of God that lives within me. Get me out of this. And then I want to figure out a path out. And this is what the Alter Rebbe says in chapter 31. He says now like this, another tip. Tip number 2. Tip number 1 was control the environment by making sure that your thinking, your approach is very solution-oriented. Now he says tip number 2, practical, very practical. Don't do this all the time. It has to be preset. But how do you know when to preset the time to do this? Choose a time that you're somehow feeling sad anyways about other things that you shouldn't be sad about. Things that we already spoke earlier, how to be able to deal with. Like, let's say I'm sad because I didn't make as much money as I wanted to make. I'm not feeling good about it. That's wrong. I shouldn't feel sad about that. We already spoke earlier how to deal with it. Oh, but instead of crawling out of it, say, you know what? I'm feeling sad because since my mood is down and I didn't make as much money as I should have, or I didn't get to go to that party I wanted to go to, blah, blah, blah. And on top of that, I don't pray. I don't study enough Torah. I'm not being... You're already sad anyways. Just let it go, but redirect it for the things you should be sad about. And then, that sadness, again, has to be solution-oriented. I want to give more charity. I want to be more helpful to people. I want to do more mitzvahs. I want to study more Torah. I want to show up to shul more often. Okay? Now I got myself out of it. Guess what? Not only now you got to benefit from this sadness, you also got the benefit of the other sadness, the money you didn't make, that was never appropriate for you to be sad about in the first place, turned out to become a catalyst that propelled this good opportunity, so it was worth it. So it's another way to be able to deal with that sadness that we spoke earlier. Another point to reflect that helps become very solution-oriented is that while I'm thinking about all the flaws and all the inappropriateness about my lifestyle and the things that I'm thinking about that are no good, I also remind myself what I already know very well by the time, if I got to chapter 31 in Tanya, I know this well, that my true identity is the godly soul and not the animal soul. So all of these flaws that I'm recognizing in my lifestyle are true, but they're not a true reflection of who I really am. So I don't really need to change to become somebody else. I just need to be living more consistently with my truth, which is my godly soul. So it's very encouraging. I'm putting myself down. I'm highlighting my worthlessness, so to speak, while I remind myself that all of this worthlessness that I'm identifying is the worthlessness of the animal soul. And that's not who I truly am. Because at the core, as a Jew, I'm a godly soul. And I just have to be living more consistently with that. So I don't have to change, I just have to become more aligned. It's very encouraging. If a person says, oh, I'm worthless, and then they say, but I can't become worthy because I don't have that capability or I don't have that opportunity, then they're stuck. They're trapped. But here, the Jew is never stuck. Because all of the worthlessness that I recognize is not about me. It's my animal soul. I mistakenly identified as the animal soul, but now I'm reminding myself everything I learned earlier. It's not. It's the godly soul. So that, again, motivates me further. That helps me be more solution-oriented in my sadness, so that I will actually come out with this in a very powerful, fully charged way to really make change and really concrete moves in my lifestyle that are going to be different than it was till now. And therefore, the Alter Rebbe describes that at the end of this exercise, the way it should look, this is what it's expected to look like, is that you're going to come out of it in an incredibly joyful mood. You're going to be super upbeat. You're going to be jolly dancing, super excited. And if you didn't reach that, then you didn't do this right. Because you're not excited because you changed. You haven't really changed yet. But you're excited by the opportunity to change. I've realized that I can change, that I will change. And that invigorates me. That charges me up with so much positivity, with so much joy, that I can't wait to get going. I can't wait to start acting on this decision, on this internal change that I've just shifted in my reality. Now I want to act on it. I want to bring it to fruition, to reality. So I'm full of joy, full of simcha. Again, the goal here is to get to a state of simcha, of joy. Just like in chapter 26, 27, etc. 29, 30, 31 is also to get to simcha. It's just an indirect way. It's not the conventional way to get to simcha. Sometimes you need it though. And when you need it, you could reach a simcha, a joy, that you'll never reach through any of the other normal paths. Because it's coming through the narrowness, through the pain, through the difficulty, that you have to bring yourself to that.
I love the structure of it, because that's how my brain kind of thinks. Everything's like in structures, and having like a control burn and just like images cemented in my brain of having a time where you can sulk and you can be sad and angry, and then from there you become positive, and that's where you make the efforts to try and improve the situation. But I like that because I think it can translate into our lives. It's actionable.
Mm-hmm. It's just important, one detail to emphasize on what you said, that we can't separate the experience and say, right now I'm going to be sad and angry, and then I'm going to be happy. It has to be that the sadness and the anger itself is producing the happiness. Otherwise, don't ever engage in the sadness and anger. If it's independent and its own right, not solution-oriented, then it's no good. It's never good. Here, it's not to say, okay, it's never good to be angry. But you know what? Let's be honest. You need outlets. So give yourself 10 minutes, be angry, punching bag, and then stop being angry. No, that's not the point. The point here is not to give yourself a little outlet or control time to be angry and then walk away from it. The point is to direct the anger to become the propeller that will ignite your spark even higher and greater than you would ever reach on your own. That's the point.
Is it natural? Is it healthy?
It's not natural.
No.
It's not natural.
No, is it healthy?
Of course it's healthy.
Because I think that actually these downs, as you said, like these sadnesses, the fuel to get you to the next level. If you're always at the top, and you don't have this boost of energy or...
You're raising a great point. Ultimately, every person who wants to really grow has to bring themselves to a point of a controlled burn, to such a point. But they're living their life with such positivity that technically they can get away without doing that. But if they really want to grow, they're going to intentionally engage in that. I'll give you an example. One of the stories I read in this book. There was a great chassid. His name was Nitcha de Masmid. This was a chassid that all he did is study Torah, pray, serve God. He was in a different level. You can almost say like a tzaddik, but he didn't consider himself such. And one time, he was sitting at a fabringen and a chassidic gathering with other people, and suddenly he says to himself, "Itche, what's with you? You're worse than the Rasha Veralo. You're worse than the wicked that's worse than him." So somebody said to him, "Why are you saying that about yourself? Even if you want to say that you believe that you've done things that are bad, like that Rasha, well, why are you worse than him? Then you say you like him." Yeah. So he says, "I'm worse than him because that Rasha never studied Chassidus. He doesn't know better. But I know a lot of Chassidus, and I still do that. So that's why I'm worse." But that's the point. This is a person who's in a very high level, but he realized that in order to grow, it's not a show. It can't be a show. This has to be honest. In other words, I have to be able to, at certain points, and I don't do this all day, but I will bring myself to a situation where I could reflect and say, who said that my greatness and my success is really truly as great as it seems? The Medrash says that even Moshe Rabbeinu, Moses, who obviously knew who he was and the greatness of who he was. He knew that he was the only person, the only human to ever have that experience, to be on the mountain with God and so on. But it says that he was humble in the face of every person in the world. So the commentary asks, how can he be humble in the face of every person? A person who's a lowlife, say, I can be humble in front of that person. I know I received the Torah from God, and that fellow, he could never even get close to that. So how can he be humble in front of that person? And the explanation is that Moshe looked at every person in this way. He said, yes, I received the Torah from God, but that's not something I worked to achieve. It's a gift God gave me. God gave me this opportunity, created me this way. That person, had he had my strengths, he'd do better than I did. And he truly looked at everyone in this way. And that's why he was humble in front of everyone. So if a person is able to really be on it and find a way to look at another person and say, this person is better than me, but to really think that way, and to say, I need to learn from that person. I need to become better. My success on paper looks much higher, much better than that person. But the effort. And I look at that person and say, you know what? I wish I had that effort. I bemoan myself. I'm not working hard enough. I need to do more. So that's the down that brings it up.
So this entire chapter, it's about being self-honest. It's
Correct.
about really be able to look at yourself and be just purely honest with yourself.
Exactly.
And so this is the challenge of most people, because we will always look at ourselves and justify ourselves.
100%,
Because we want to be honest.
Yeah.
But it's a big difference between I believe I'm honest